Sarah's eyes opened slowly. Something felt wrong. The house was too quiet. Way too quiet. Every morning for the past year, her twin babies woke her up with giggles and cries. Emma would shake her crib rails. Ethan would throw his stuffed bear across the room. But this morning, there was nothing. Just silence. Sarah sat up in bed, her heart beating a little faster. She looked at the clock. 7:30. The twins were always awake by 7. Always. She threw off her blanket and hurried down the hallway. Her bare feet made soft sounds on the wooden floor. The nursery door was at the end of the hall. It was closed. She always left it open at night, so she could hear the babies. Who closed it? Sarah walked faster. As she got closer, she heard something, a soft humming sound. It was strange, like a song played backward or underwater. The sound made her skin prickle. Then she saw them. Emma and Ethan were outside the nursery door, in the hallway. They were pressing their tiny bodies against the door, pushing with all their strength. Their little hands were flat against the wood. Their faces were serious, more serious than any 1-year-old should ever look. Emma? Ethan? Sarah whispered. The twins didn't turn around. They didn't even look at her. They just kept pushing against the door, as if something terrible was trying to get out, and they were the only thing stopping it. Sarah's stomach dropped. Her hands started to shake. "Babies, what are you doing?" she asked, louder this time. Still nothing. Emma pressed her cheek against the door. Ethan's little fingers spread wide, pushing harder. Sarah reached for the doorknob. It was ice cold, so cold it burned her hand. She pulled back with a gasp. The humming got louder. It was coming from inside the nursery. It wasn't a pretty sound. It was dark and wrong, like the wind crying through a broken window. Sarah felt goosebumps rise on her arms. She tried the doorknob again, gripping it tight even though it hurt. She turned it and pushed. The door wouldn't move. Something was blocking it from the other side. But that was impossible. There was nothing in that room except cribs, toys, and a rocking chair. Nothing heavy enough to block a door. Sarah pushed harder. The door moved just an inch, then stopped. Through the tiny crack, cold air rushed out. It smelled weird, like metal and rain and something rotten. Sarah's breath came out in little white clouds, even though it was summer. "Emma, Ethan, move back," Sarah said, trying to sound calm. "Mommy needs to open the door." But the twins shook their heads. Emma made a tiny sound in her throat, almost like a growl. Ethan whispered something Sarah couldn't hear. Then Sarah felt it. Fingers. On the other side of the door, something was pressing back. She could feel it through the wood. Small, cold fingers pushing against the door from inside the nursery, right where her hand was. But her babies were here in the hallway with her. So whose fingers were those? Sarah yanked her hand away. Her heart pounded so hard she could hear in her ears. The humming grew louder and louder, filling the hallway, filling her head. "No," Emma whispered. It was the first word either twin had said all morning. "Go," Ethan added, his voice small but firm. Sarah didn't know if they were talking to her or to whatever was behind that door. She took a deep breath. She was the mom. She had to be brave. She had to protect her babies. She grabbed both twins and pulled them back, away from the door. They squirmed and reached for it, trying to get back to their post. Emma's face crumpled like she might cry. Ethan grabbed Sarah's shirt and pulled. "It's okay," Sarah whispered, even though she didn't believe it. "Mommy's here." She set them down behind her and faced the door again. Her whole body was shaking now. She put both hands on the doorknob, counted to 3 in her head, and shoved with all her strength. The door flew open. The nursery was dark, even though the sun was shining outside. The curtains were drawn shut, but Sarah didn't remember closing them. The room felt smaller somehow, like the walls were pressing in. And it was freezing. Sarah could see her breath. The temperature must have dropped 30 degrees. Emma and Ethan crawled past her legs into the room. They sat down on the floor, right in the middle, facing the far corner. They held hands. Emma clutched her teddy bear with her other arm. Ethan stared straight ahead, not blinking. Sarah flipped the light switch. Nothing happened. The light didn't turn on. She stepped into the room, her legs feeling like jelly. Emma? Ethan? Come back to Mommy. They didn't move. They just sat there, holding hands, staring at the dark corner behind the rocking chair. Sarah followed their gaze. At first, she saw nothing. Just shadows. Just the corner of the room where she kept a basket of stuffed animals. Then the shadows moved. They stretched and twisted, pulling together like smoke gathering into a shape. The air grew even colder. Sarah's teeth chattered. The humming stopped. In the silence, Sarah heard her babies breathing. Fast little breaths. Scared breaths. But they didn't run. They didn't cry. They just sat there, tiny guardians on the nursery floor, hands locked together, facing whatever was forming in that corner. The shadow grew taller. It rose up and up, touching the ceiling. It had no face, no eyes, but Sarah could feel it watching her babies. Emma squeezed Ethan's hand tighter. "No," she whispered again. The shadow stopped growing. It hung there, dark and heavy and wrong, like a storm cloud trapped inside the room. Sarah wanted to scream. She wanted to grab her babies and run, but her body wouldn't move. Her feet were frozen to the floor. The rocking chair started to rock, even though no one was in it. Back and forth, back and forth. The creaking sound filled the silent room. Then, from the basket of stuffed animals, a small bunny flew across the room and hit the wall. Sarah finally found her voice. "Get away from my children," she screamed. The shadow turned toward her. She couldn't see eyes, but she felt its attention shift. It was cold and angry and hungry. It made her stomach twist. But then Emma and Ethan spoke together, at the exact same time, in the exact same voice. "Go away." The shadow shivered. Sarah blinked. Had it worked? Had her babies actually pushed the shadow back? For a moment, everything was still. The rocking chair stopped. The cold air seemed to hold its breath. Then the shadow rushed forward. It moved toward the twins like a wave of darkness, ready to swallow them whole. Sarah screamed and lunged forward, but Emma and Ethan were faster. "N.O.!" they shouted together, and their voices rang to the room like a bell. The shadow recoiled, pulling back into the corner. It twisted and writhed, as if their words had hurt it. Then, with a sound like breaking glass, it vanished. The room flooded with light. The curtains flew open on their own. Warm sunshine poured through the windows. On the floor, scattered around the twins, were pieces of broken mirrors Sarah didn't remember owning. Emma and Ethan looked up at their mother. Their eyes were wide and knowing, far too knowing for babies her age. Sarah dropped to her knees and pulled them into her arms. They were ice cold. She held them tight, trying to warm them, trying to stop her own shaking. "What was that?" she whispered. "What just happened?" But her babies couldn't answer. They were only 1 year old. Except they had answered, hadn't they? They had spoken. They had fought back. As Sarah rocked her children, she looked at the corner where the shadow had been. It was empty now, just a normal corner in a normal nursery. But Sarah knew the truth. Whatever had been in her house, it wasn't gone. Not really. It was waiting. And somehow, her baby twins knew it was coming back. Sarah couldn't stop shaking. She sat on the floor of the nursery, holding Emma and Ethan close. The sunshine streaming through the windows felt wrong now, like it was trying too hard to pretend everything was normal. But nothing was normal. Sarah looked down at her babies. They were calm now, too calm. They weren't crying or fussing. They just sat in her lap, staring at that corner, watching, waiting. "You're freezing," Sarah whispered, rubbing their little arms. Their skin was like ice. She carried them to the bathroom and filled the tub with warm water. As she bathed them, she noticed they wouldn't look away from the bathroom door. Emma's eyes were locked on it. Ethan's tiny hand gripped the edge of the tub, like he was ready to jump out and guard it at any second. "What do you see?" Sarah asked softly. "What are you looking at?" Emma turned to her mother. For just a second, her baby face looked old and tired, like she carried secrets too heavy for someone so small. Then she smiled, and she was just a 1-year-old again. But Sarah had seen it, that flash of something else, something ancient and knowing. After drying the twins and dressing them in warm clothes, Sarah put them in the living room with their toys. She needed to think. She needed to understand what had happened. She made coffee with shaking hands and sat at the kitchen table. Her phone lay in front of her. She should call someone. But who? What would she even say? Hi, there's a shadow monster in my house, and my 1-year-old twins can fight it. They'd think she was crazy. Maybe she was crazy. Sarah looked up. Through the kitchen doorway, she could see Emma and Ethan in the living room. They weren't playing. They sat side by side, perfectly still, staring at the hallway that led to the nursery. Watching. Always watching. Sarah's phone buzzed. It was her neighbor, Mrs. Chun. Just checking on you, dear. I heard screaming this morning. Is everything all right? Sarah's finger hovered over the reply button. Then she had an idea. She called Mrs. Chun instead. Hi, Mrs. Chun. Yes, sorry about the noise. Can I ask you something? Do you know anything about this house? About its history? There was a pause on the other end. A long pause. Why do you ask? Mrs. Chen's voice had changed. It sounded careful now, worried. Please, Sarah said. I need to know. Another pause. Then Mrs. Chen sighed. Come over. Bring the babies. We need to talk. 20 minutes later, Sarah sat in Mrs. Chen's cozy kitchen while Emma and Ethan played on the floor. Except they weren't really playing. They were watching the windows, the doors, the shadows in the corners. Mrs. Chun poured tea and sat down. Your house, she began, was empty for 3 years before you bought it. I know, Sarah said. That's why I got such a good price. Do you know why it was empty? Sarah shook her head. Mrs. Chin leaned forward. The family before you. They left in the middle of the night. Didn't take anything. Just ran. The mother told me something had gotten into the house. Something dark. It wanted their daughter. Sarah's blood ran cold. What happened to the daughter? She was fine. The thing never got her. But it never left either. The family couldn't take it anymore, so they fled. Why didn't you tell me this before I bought the house? I thought maybe it was gone. 3 years and nothing happened. No one reported anything strange. Mrs. Chin looked at the twins. Until you moved in with them. With Emma and Ethan? What do they have to do with it? Mrs. Chen's eyes were sad and knowing. Some children are born with gifts. They can see things we can't, feel things we can't, and sometimes they can fight things we can't. Sarah felt tears building in her eyes. They're just babies. Yes, and that's what makes them powerful. Their love is pure. Their hearts are clean. Darkness hates that. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, listening to every sound. The house seemed alive, creaking and groaning. The wind outside sounded like whispers. At midnight, she heard it, the humming. Sarah shot up in bed. The sound was coming from the nursery again. She ran down the hallway and found Emma and Ethan already awake, standing in their cribs. They weren't crying. They were watching the corner. The same corner. The shadows were gathering again. No, Sarah whispered. Not again. She turned on every light in the room, but it didn't help. The shadow was stronger this time. It didn't care about the light. It grew anyway, spreading across the wall like ink in water. The temperature dropped. Sarah's breath came out in clouds. Emma and Ethan climbed out of their cribs. Sarah didn't even know they could do that yet, but they moved fast, like they'd been practicing. They stood in the middle of the room, holding hands. The rocking chair started moving again, back and forth, back and forth. Then the toys began to rise. Blocks floated in the air. Stuffed animals drifted up like balloons. The mobile above the crib spun faster and faster, making a horrible screeching sound. The shadow took shape. It was taller than before, darker than before. It looked almost human now, with long arms and a head that tilted in a wrong, broken way. Get away from my babies. Sarah screamed, stepping between the shadow and the twins. But Emma and Ethan pulled her back. Their tiny hands were surprisingly strong. No, Mama, Emma said clearly. Too clearly. We stop it, Ethan added. The shadow moved forward, its arms reaching out. The cold was so intense Sarah felt like her bones were freezing. The twins let go of Sarah and stepped toward the shadow. No! Sarah tried to grab them, but she couldn't move. Something held her in place, like invisible hands gripping her shoulders. Emma and Ethan stood face to face with the darkness. The shadow bent down, its faceless head inches from the babies. Sarah could feel its hunger, its hatred. It wanted to take them, wanted to swallow their light. Please, Sarah sobbed. Please don't hurt them. Then Emma and Ethan spoke together, their voices overlapping into one voice. You are not welcome here. This is our home. Our mama's home. You cannot have us. The shadow paused. Go away, the twins said together. Go away. Their voices rang out clear and strong and bright. The room seemed to shake. The floating toys dropped to the floor. The mobile stopped spinning. The shadow writhed and twisted, like something was burning it from the inside. It made a sound, a terrible shrieking sound that made Sarah want to cover her ears. But the twins didn't flinch. They stood firm, hands locked together, their small faces fierce and brave. Go away, they shouted again. Light burst from where they stood, not from a lamp or the windows, but from the twins themselves. A warm, golden light that pushed back the darkness. The shadow screamed. It tried to hold on, clawing at the walls, leaving dark marks on the paint. But the light was stronger. With a final, horrible shriek, the shadow exploded into 1,000 pieces. Black mist filled the room for a second, then vanished like smoke and wind. The invisible force holding Sarah released her. She collapsed to her knees, gasping. The room was warm again. The toys lay scattered on the floor. The rocking chair was still. Emma and Ethan turned to their mother. They looked tired now, their faces pale. They walked to Sarah on wobbly legs and climbed into her lap. Mama, they whispered together, and then they were just babies again, crying softly, needing comfort. Sarah held them tight, tears streaming down her face. It's okay, she whispered. You were so brave. So brave. But even as she rocked them, even as she sang them a lullaby, Sarah knew the truth. The shadow had been stronger this time. Next time, it might be even stronger. And there would be a next time. She could feel it waiting, just beyond the walls, gathering its strength. The fight wasn't over. On the wall where the shadow had clawed, Sarah noticed something. Words, scratched into the paint in dark, jagged letters. Mine. Sarah's blood turned to ice. She looked down at her sleeping babies, so small and innocent in her arms. No, she whispered to the empty room, to whatever was listening. They're mine, and I won't let you have them. Outside, the wind howled. Somewhere in the house, a door slammed shut. The shadow was listening, and it was angry. Sarah didn't sleep for 3 days. Every creak in the house made her jump. Every shadow looked like it was moving. She kept all the lights on, even during the day. She played music constantly, trying to drown out the humming that came back every night. Emma and Ethan changed too. They stopped playing like normal babies. They didn't laugh as much. They spent their time watching doors and windows, their little heads turning toward sounds Sarah couldn't hear. Sometimes they whispered to each other in a language Sarah didn't understand. Sometimes they held hands and stared at walls like they could see through them. Sarah knew she needed help. Real help. She spent hours on her computer, searching for answers. She read about ghosts and spirits. She looked up old stories about shadows that steal children. She found websites about houses with dark histories and people with special gifts. Then she found something important. A post from 5 years ago. A woman describing the exact same thing that was happening to Sarah. A shadow in the nursery. Children who could fight it. And one sentence that made Sarah's heart race. The shadow feeds on fear, but love is stronger. When my family stood together, it couldn't touch us. Together, that was the answer. Sarah had been trying to protect Emma and Ethan, but maybe they needed to protect each other. All 3 of them, as a family. That night, Sarah prepared. She couldn't use weapons against something that had no body. She couldn't lock doors against something that walked through walls. But she had something the shadow didn't have. Love. She put Emma and Ethan to bed early. She read them stories about brave knights and powerful dragons. She sang them songs about heroes who never gave up. She held them close and whispered, "We're stronger together, always together." The twins looked up at her with those knowing eyes. They understood. At midnight, the humming began. This time, Sarah was ready. She went in the nursery and picked up both twins. She held them close, one on each hip. "Whatever happens," she whispered, "we stay together." "Okay, Mama," they said together. The temperature dropped so fast that frost formed on the windows. The lights flickered and went out. In the darkness, Sarah felt the shadow gathering. It was bigger than before. It filled the whole room, pressing against the walls like it was trying to burst through. The air felt thick and wrong, like trying to breathe underwater. The rocking chair moved violently, slamming back and forth. Toys flew across the room, smashing against walls. The curtains ripped themselves from the windows, and then the shadow took shape. It was huge this time, touching the ceiling with arms that split into dozens of reaching fingers. It had a face now, or something like a face. Empty holes where eyes should be. A mouth open in a silent scream. Sarah wanted to run. Every part of her body screamed at her to grab her babies and flee. But she stood firm. "You can't have them," she said, her voice shaking but loud. "They're mine. We belong to each other." The shadow laughed. It was a horrible sound, like breaking bones and tearing paper and nails on a chalkboard all mixed together. The word on the wall glowed in the darkness. "Mine." "No," Sarah said. "Ours." She held Emma and Ethan tighter. The twins wrapped their arms around her neck. "Together," Emma whispered. "Together," Ethan echoed. "Together," Sarah said firmly. The shadow rushed forward like a tidal wave of darkness. Its fingers reached the twins, trying to pull them away from Sarah. Sarah felt the cold grip her, trying to freeze her arms, trying to make her let go. Her muscles screamed. Her bones ached, but she held on. "I love you," she whispered to her babies. "I love you so much." "Love you, Mama," they whispered back. And then something amazing happened. Light began to glow around them, not harsh or bright, but warm and soft, like sunrise. It came from Sarah. It came from Emma and Ethan. It came from the space between them, from their connection, from their love. The shadow pulled back, hissing. "That's right," Sarah said, feeling strength flow through her. "You can't break us. We're family." The twins began to speak, their voices mixing with Sarah's. "You're not welcome here. This is our home, our family, our love." The light grew brighter. It pushed against the shadow, forcing it back into the corner. The shadow fought hard. It threw everything it had at them. The walls cracked. The floor shook. Pictures fell from the walls, glass shattering everywhere. But Sarah, Emma, and Ethan stood together, unmoving. "Go away," they shouted as one voice. "Go away and never come back." The light exploded outward, filling every corner of the room, every crack in the walls, every shadow where darkness could hide. The shadow shrieked. It twisted and writhed, trying to hold on, trying to stay. But the light was too strong. Love was too strong. With a sound like thunder and breaking chains, the shadow shattered into a million pieces. The pieces dissolved into nothing, vanishing like ice and fire. The room fell silent. The lights flickered back on. The toys settled on the floor. The rocking chair stopped moving. Sarah collapsed to her knees, still holding her babies. They were crying now, all three of them, tears of relief and exhaustion and joy. "It's gone," Sarah sobbed. "It's really gone." Emma and Ethan hugged her tight. "Gone, Mama, all gone." Sarah looked around the room. The word on the wall had vanished. The cold was gone. The air felt clean and fresh, like after summer rain. She carried the twins to her bed, and they all slept together that night, wrapped in blankets, holding each other close. When Sarah woke the next morning, sunshine poured through the windows. Birds sang outside. The house felt different, lighter, safer. Emma and Ethan were playing in her bed, giggling and throwing stuffed animals at each other. They looked like normal babies again, happy, innocent, free. Over the next few weeks, Sarah watched her twins carefully. They still held hands a lot. They still seemed to communicate without words. But the watchfulness was gone. They laughed more. They played more. The house was just a house again. But Sarah never forgot what happened. She never forgot what her babies could do. She never forgot that love, real love, was the most powerful force in the world. Sometimes, late at night, Emma or Ethan would wake up and look toward the corners of the room. Sarah's heart would race, but they would just smile, roll over, and go back to sleep. The shadow was gone, and it wasn't coming back. Sarah had learned something important. The smallest people can have the biggest courage. Innocence is a kind of strength, and when a family stands together, nothing can break them. One day, when Emma and Ethan were older, she would tell them the full story. She would help them understand their gift. She would teach them to use it wisely. But for now, they were just babies. Her babies. Safe and loved and protected. And that was enough. A message for you. Did the story give you chills? Did you feel the fear, the courage, the love? If you enjoyed this tale of tiny guardians and the power of family, smash that share button. Send it to someone who believes in the magic of love, or someone who needs to remember that even the smallest voices can push back the darkness. Don't forget to subscribe for more spine-tingling stories that will keep you up at night, but also warm your heart. Have you ever felt like something was watching you? Have you ever heard sounds you couldn't explain? Maybe, just maybe, you have your own little guardians protecting you, even if you can't see them. Remember, stay close to the ones you love. Listen to the quiet warnings. And never underestimate the power of holding hands in the dark. Share this story if you believe in love's power to protect us all. Drop a comment below. Would you have been as brave as Sarah? Or would you have run? See you in the next story, if you dare.